Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on into another episode of the Rust Belt Rivalry podcast. I'm Brian Philos. My co-host Nick was too afraid to show up after losing to the 0-7 Jets this week. But as usual, I've got a jam-packed show for you, offering Browns, Bengals, a little bit of Buckeyes. To be honest, I didn't get a chance to watch much college football this weekend. We had a lot going on. But a recap of the NFL week in, a preview to the week ahead, and just a lot of other things going on, right? So let's get right into it. I mentioned the Bengals. They lost 39-38 to the 0-7 Jets. The Bengals defense is just not good. I know Nick, I talked to him on Monday morning. He was super frustrated with the Bengals, super down. Not that it's that big of a deal. I mean, the defense is just not where you expect them to be, right? And just week after week, they made Fields look like an all-star. They made Breece Hall look like an all-star. It's just not what we expected from an 0-7 team, right? Now, Flacco did look really good again. Obviously, anytime you put up 38 points on offense, you would hope that would be enough, but it just wasn't. Chase Brown, as Nick predicted, finally scores his first touchdown since week 1. Not only did he have a rushing touchdown, he had a receiving touchdown, 72 yards on the ground, 32 yards receiving. What a great game for him. Some other highlights from the Bengals players: Jamar Chase, 12 receptions, 91 yards. T. Higgins, only one catch for 44 yards and a touchdown. But it was a pretty big play. But again, it just – at the end of the game, it came down to Flacco had a chance to win the game, and they couldn't get it done. There were some weird things that kind of went on, right? There was a 2-point conversion that initially was called no good that ended up getting reversed for the Jets. The Jets were down 38-24 in like the middle of the fourth quarter. So it was a pretty big comeback, especially for a coach that everybody thought was going to be fired, Aaron Glenn, and very soon. Breece Hall, again, looked like an all-star. I mean, he had 133 yards on the ground, 2 rushing touchdowns, and a kind of a gimmicky first and goal. He threw a pass for a touchdown. So that was kind of just I'm sure Nick was just screaming at the TV. The Bengals defense is just, again, just not good, right? They allow 25.5 points per game and 348 yards per game, both ranked 25th in the NFL, and you just can't win that way, right? And this is even knowing that out of their 7 or 8 games, whatever they were, that the Browns were one of them. I think the Browns only put up like 14 or 16 points on them. So that brings the average down immensely. The defense, no sacks this week, which is just, that's pretty embarrassing against a bad Jets team. The interceptions that they have been getting that saved them in a couple of the games that they've been in this year weren't there this week. There were no interceptions for the Bengals. And like I said, that saved them, kind of gave them some momentum against the Steelers and in a couple other games. And that just wasn't there this week. So it was a rough game to watch. But again, it's just is what it is. There's just no defense there. Unlike the Browns, which are pretty good on defense, as you've seen in another game they played against the Patriots. The final score doesn't say that, right? Because the Browns lost 32-13. But if you watch the game, it was the same old story. The Browns defense played lights out for 2.5 quarters. And the Browns offense, aside from scoring on their first drive, which Kevin Stefanski has shown that he's really good at. He's really good at scheming up the first drive of the game. Somehow they score frequently on the first drive, and then again, there is nothing. 3 and outs, 4 and outs, just punt after punt after punt. You see the memes. It's just embarrassing. Myles Garrett, 5 sacks this week. The defense causes 2 turnovers. The first one, an interception, which Carson Schlesinger, first interception of his career, puts the Browns at like the 35-yard line in position to score. The Browns go 3 and out. Dylan Gabriel throws up an ugly ball, underthrown. And then Austin Schmidt, who hasn't missed a kick since week 1 against the Bengals, shows up again to miss a 47-yarder. It doesn't really matter in the end anyway. Like I said, the Browns just couldn't get anything going on offense. It was just really ugly. And, despite Myles Garrett having an all-star game, like an all-pro game in one game, 5 sacks, I mean, that I can't even imagine, like, that's only 20 other players have done that. It's just embarrassing that they would lose in such an embarrassing fashion. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, we did lose Tyson Campbell to a concussion from our own player running into him, which, that happens. And then Carson Schlesinger did go out, and he's expected to miss a few weeks. So that was kind of when the wheels started coming off for the defense. Drake May started attacking that side of the field. The offensive coordinator, Josh McDaniels, was scheming things up very well, creating a lot of misdirection, which we all know the Browns defense struggles with. And ultimately it came to fruition. The one thing that I'm confused about, so I follow a lot of Browns fans on TikTok, on Twitter, all over the place, right? The Browns fans in general, and I've even heard this on the radio shows and talk shows, a lot of people have complained that the Browns they're not creative, right? Kevin Stefanski's not creative enough. He's not in his bag, so to speak. He doesn't dial up these easy plays creativity-wise. And last week we saw some creative plays with the Wildcat in a bad weather game against the Dolphins. And this week you saw Kevin Stefanski try and dial up some plays, some flea flickers that didn't work because the offensive line whiffed on an assignment. Just some generic, screen, like a generic looking screen that was intended to then go to the running back. Jerome Ford gets blasted out of his shoes. Quinshon Judkins goes out, but it's like, we complain when he doesn't dial up these creative plays. Then they try creative plays, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, right? And some of them didn't work, and now everybody's mad at him for being too fancy schmancy and trying to be too smart. I just don't know what else you expect, really, from Kevin Stefanski. I stopped defending him a long time ago. I don't think he's a very good coach anymore. But Dylan Gabriel just isn't good, right? He's proven that time and time again. He had his worst performance of the season, and he's now 4 weeks in, so he's not showing any growth. 21 for 35, 156 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. So the turnover-worthy plays that everybody tried to defend Dylan Gabriel on that have been there for the last 3 weeks that he's just been getting lucky on finally rear their ugly head, and the defenders actually catch the ball this week, and it's just not good, right? I don't know. I don't understand. There's obviously something fishy, in my opinion, going on with Shedeur Sanders. I thought he was better than Dylan Gabriel coming out of college. Somehow the man can't even get first-team reps. Obviously, Dylan Gabriel, many people have linked him to Kevin Stefanski. I guess that's Kevin Stefanski's guy. And Kevin's just going to, I guess, continue to do everything he can for Dylan Gabriel, right? Dylan Gabriel, on the other hand, has been getting first-team reps as member in training camp and all along. So I'm not really sure how they keep saying that Shedeur Sanders is progressing, but then all of a sudden he has this mysterious injury. It seems like he's in Kevin Stefanski's doghouse, and I'm not a fan of it. I don't understand why. I thought Shedeur was better coming out of college. I just don't get it, right? But back to Dylan Gabriel, even the offensive line, I don't know what their pass blocking grade was, but they weren't even that bad. So Dylan Gabriel, he's throwing, he's in the end zone and he throws a safety because he throws to a receiver that isn't there. Like, it's all not good. So it's just embarrassing to watch. it's embarrassing for the defense to have to put up with that. And even Mike Vrabel made a joke at the as after game presser, saying that once the trick plays were over with, their defense played really well, which they did, right? So, just another frustrating week for a Browns fan. We head into the bye week, and it's just, what does it matter? Somehow we'll lose the bye week too. But anyway, let's flip to focus around the NFL. There were some unfortunate injuries this week. A.J. Brown goes out before the game. He had a hamstring, so he was out. They have a bye coming up. I imagine that hopefully it was just more precautionary and give him 2 weeks off. Isaiah Pacheco had an MCL sprain. He's week to week. Patrick Surtain, the Broncos' number one DB, pectoral injury, so he'll be out at least a couple weeks. Ed Oliver, another unfortunate injury. He had a torn bicep, so he'll be sidelined for the rest of the year. For those of you that don't know, he's a defensive tackle for the Bills, and he's been detrimental for them over the last few years. So that's a big blow, I think, to the Bills, who had a really good game. And then the biggest one, I'm guessing all of you have seen it, videos circulating, Cam Skattebo, dislocated ankle. I mean, it looked like his foot just separated from his shin or his knee. Just an ugly, ugly, ugly injury. Both teams came out. There were some nice stories. Seems like a really good guy, and made a post saying thank you to all the Eagles people that came to visit him and all that. So unfortunate, his season is over. And I mean, so let's just talk about that game real quick. I mean, the Eagles were definitely winning the game. Saquon Barkley just had a monster game, and it seemed like it was going to be a shootout for most part of it. And then I believe that the Giants were down 14-10 when Skattebo went out. And you could just see in the highlights and the videos that Dart was just very upset. They had obviously grown close over the last few weeks, months, whatever. And that just kind of changed the complexion of the game, in my opinion. And it ended up that the Eagles just took care of business. I mean, it ended up being 38-20. Couple of weird calls. It looked like Jalen Hurts fumbled the ball on a tush push, which was initially called that way and then brought back, which would have given the Eagles a chance. And then another thing, there was an offensive pass interference that wasn't called in another game, but then there was this very light pass interference that was called against the Giants for a touchdown. And just some fluky stuff going on in there. But nonetheless, the Eagles get their win back, I guess, against the Giants. The Dolphins somehow blow out the Kirk Cousins-led Falcons, which I didn't see Kirk Cousins starting this week. I'm guessing that was a last-minute thing. Penix must have got injured or something. But after the Dolphins got just brutalized by the Browns, I thought their season was over and they weren't going to have any fight in them. But they came back and showed some grit, some determination. Onto the Ravens. Snoop Huntley back with the Ravens. He just keeps on coming. The kid's like a boomerang, man. But they smacked the Bears around a little bit, right? I think the Caleb Williams is growing, is developing, is becoming a much better quarterback. But a good defense that's coached by John Harbaugh and those folks down there in Baltimore, it was just almost too much for him. I saw one interception was kind of silly that he shouldn't have thrown. But they're very good at deceiving, right? So that's just kind of how the Ravens play, and that's kind of the AFC North in general. For the most part is really good defenses. So the one weird thing I will say is it seems like the Ravens are just being a little weird about the injury to Lamar. Some people were questioning about whether they should have had him on the injury report or not. Some weird things going on, and I'm not really sure if it's just gamesmanship by Harbaugh getting away with whatever he can. I mean, we know his brother when he was with that team up north and all the alleged cheating that they did up there. And the Bills, man, they came back in extreme fashion. They blow out the Panthers, which, again, we talked about it last week on the show. Andy Dalton, the red rifle, I don't think he has much left in the tank. He just couldn't keep up. James Cook was just cooking it up. 153 yards, most of it right up the middle of the defense on 12 rushes with a touchdown. Josh Allen sets a record in the NFL, 46th game with both a rushing touchdown and a passing touchdown. Passes Cam Newton, and pretty cool. But the Bills win 40-9. The Texans finally the offense comes back to life. C.J. Stroud was missing his top two wide receivers. Still diced up the 49ers defense, who I thought was pretty good. Now they are Fred Warnerless, which we talked earlier this year, but C.J. Stroud is finally coming back to the quarterback that we all expected him to be at the beginning of the year. 49ers try to keep it close in the end, come up short. 26-15 was the final score. Mac Jones, I thought he could lead a comeback. He ended up throwing a pick when it mattered the most. And a stat that I found interesting was the Texans only allow 14.7 points per game, which I had no idea that was the case. I don't think that they can catch the Colts in this division. I think the Colts have proven time and time again their dominance out of nowhere, really, but still they're just week after week, they just continue to show it. But I do think that the Texans are primed now to come back. A lot of the other AFC teams that we thought were going to be good are weaker this year. And I think that the Texans can absolutely get a wild card spot and definitely make some noise in the playoffs. If C.J. Stroud can keep this up, if they can get healthy, this defense continues to allow the minimum amount of points. I'm excited to see what the Texans can do. Buccaneers take care of business against the Saints. Just an ugly game for the Saints. Spencer Rattler just not good. They end up putting Tyler Shook in there for a little bit. He also didn't look very good. Really, as a Browns fan, was kind of a relief to see him struggle a little bit. I know that was somebody that we had talked about a lot prior to the draft. Again, I mentioned the Colts asserted their dominance over the Titans. No surprise there. And then the Chiefs as well just put a stomping on the Commanders. Again, no Jaden Daniels. But, I mean, these teams are just cooking, and these are just two teams that in the AFC we really need to keep an eye out for. Broncos handle business somehow. The Cowboys, whose offense seemed like it could just never be stopped by anybody, they only held them to 24 points. That sounds like a lot, but I'm pretty sure they were averaging 39, 40 points a game. So 24 points is not too bad. The Broncos put up 44 points themselves, and the Packers beat up on the Steelers defense. Somehow the Packers put up 35 points. Steelers only put up 25, which not a huge surprise, but it was fun for me to watch as a Browns fan, watch the Steelers lose a little bit. Let me take a quick break here. Just a little sip. Sorry. Now let's head into the week ahead, right? Trade deadline. By the time we do the next show next week, Wednesday, the trade deadline will have already come and passed. So trade deadline is November 4th, Tuesday at 4 p.m. Hearing a lot of names. There's a lot of smoke coming from a lot of places. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the AFC teams are just not what they expect it to be. So who knows? There could be a lot of smoke and no fire. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of moves that happen this trade deadline. I've heard a lot of wide receivers, a lot of running backs. Who knows? So just keep an eye out, and we should be talking about a couple moves that could have a really big impact on the show. Browns have a bye next week. Again, I already mentioned it. The Browns somehow always lose, even with a bye week. And they've also announced that Dylan Gabriel is going to be the starter. Most logical NFL fans realize that it was just silly for the coach to do it this way. But again, this is the Browns, right? We're coming into a bye week. Dylan Gabriel has played terribly and has actually gotten worse week after week after week. If you look at the statistics, And for the head coach to just say, no, we're going to stick with what we're doing, but we're going to reflect on things, even though our offense is terrible. It's just a typical Browns move, right? So enough of the Browns. They have a bye week, but let's focus on the Bengals. They face the Bears. Again, I wish my co-host was here because we both butt heads on what we think the Bears could be, should be, will be. I think this is a very winnable game for the Bengals. I think the Bears' offense is better than the Jets, and I would be surprised if this is not another high-scoring affair. I think the over on the total points was like 50.5, 51.5. The Bears' defense has been all right this year, not that great, but we obviously know that the Bengals' offense, now that they have Joe Flacco and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and it seems that Chase Brown is getting going, and they're going to put up some points, right? I think Williams ultimately has a bounce-back game. Caleb Williams and the Bears. Again, I think the Ravens' defense is just time after time, they're just finding players at their players, and I think they're better than they've been playing this year. And I think Caleb Williams has a bounce-back game. Ultimately, I see the Bears winning a close game. I'm sure Nick will have a conniption fit when he hears me say that. He's probably, if you go with his lock of the week last week, which was the Bengals to win, to cover the spread against the Jets, which he picks with his heart. I think he would be mad at me for picking the Bears to win, but I just have a good feeling that Joe Flacco is due, right? I know Joe Flacco. I've seen him in a couple of years here at the Browns. At this time in his life, like, he is just due for a multiple turnover game. And I think that's going to haunt him this game. And I think Caleb Williams either plays well enough or has a game-winning drive to seal the deal for the Bears this week. So that being said, my bold prediction this week for the Bengals is that Joe Flacco does have 2 turnovers. Whether it's a sack, fumble, or interception, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty confident that Joe's going to come back down to earth and have 2 turnovers. Like I said, the Bears win that game. And my bold prediction for the Browns, as I alluded to earlier, they're going to lose at the trade deadline somehow, even though it's a bye week. They'll trade away. They're stocking up on tight ends for some reason, which to me screams that they're going to get rid of Njoku. He's in his final year of this deal, and they don't seem to want to re-sign him. They found a replacement for him in Harold Fannin Jr., who's having a stellar year. And then they'll whiff at the trade deadline, and then they'll continue to tell us that they're trying to win this year. They'll sell us a bill of goods. Maybe we win another 2 games the rest of the year. I would be surprised if that even happens at this point. I'd rather just see them lose, get a higher draft pick. Obviously, the coach and the players don't feel that way, but that's how I feel as a fan. Other good games around the league that I'm looking forward to, you've got the Broncos and Texans. I think that's going to be an awesome game. At first, I was thinking maybe a defensive battle, but I think these offenses are just too hot, right? I think the Broncos and Bo Nix, whatever clicked in that Giants game in that fourth quarter, obviously carried over against the Cowboys last week, and I see them continue to roll, even though the Texans have only held their opponents to 14.7 points a game. I think this is something that gets changed this week. Also, again, we mentioned C.J. Stroud. He was a lot better the last week, even without his number 1 and number 2 wide receivers. So when they're back, I fully expect him to have a much better game. And I just think this is going to be a high-scoring game, especially with Patrick Surtain out. We mentioned that earlier. I think Stroud's going to just continue to ball out, and I think Bo Nix is too. And then the other big game I'm looking forward to is the Chiefs and the Bills. Every time we have a matchup with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, somehow there's almost always fireworks, right? There's almost always, it seems that they are high-scoring games, high-scoring affairs. Now, the defenses have both been a lot better this year, so I would stay away from betting on any part of that. Obviously, we know that Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are themselves, and we could very easily have another offensive showdown, but you never know. It's a 425 game, and I'm just looking forward to watching that game. It should be a lot of fun. My locks of the week. So let's recap here. I am not huge on locks of the week, but I've been very diligent on my picks because in the event that people follow along, I want you to be able to hopefully make a little bit of cheddar on your following me. So oddly enough, week 1 I went 2 for 2, and last week I kept it up. I went 2 for 2 again last week. I had the Bills covering the spread, and I had the over on the Eagles-Giants game. So right now we're sitting at 4 for 4, folks, and I have 2 more locks of the week. Hopefully we can keep the gravy train rolling, and we can just parlay this one again. My 2 picks this week are the Colts -3. Maybe you can get it. I saw on some sites -2.5, which would be even better. I don't think the Steelers defense is anywhere as good as it used to be. I think this Colts offense is just too potent, and I think they're going to roll through the Steelers. I don't think the Steelers offense has enough firepower to keep up with a team like the Colts. And I just think it's going to be a high-scoring affair, especially on the Colts side. So I expect them to win by at least a touchdown, probably 10 points or more. And just like very similar to the Packers game this past week, I don't see the Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers being able to keep up. I just don't see it. The other thing I like is the total points in the Broncos-Texans game. I alluded to it earlier. The total points for that game is only 39.5. I'm guessing it's in large part due to the defensive performances this year. Again, Patrick Surtain is out. CJ Stroud played a phenomenal game the last 2 games, put up, I think, 7 or 8 touchdowns in the last 2 games. Same thing with Bo Nix. Bo Nix is hot right now. So I highly anticipate both of those teams scoring at minimum 21 points, and I think it's going to be way over that. So Colts -3 and total points for the Broncos-Texans 39.5. That'll wrap it up for our NFL portion. The preview ahead, a little bit of Ohio State. Unfortunately, a big bummer, right? They've got Penn State coming into town. We all know James Franklin's already been fired. Drew Aller injured for the season. It's very unfortunate what's going on over there in Penn State. The spread currently sits at -20.5 for your Buckeyes. I was really excited about this game before the year started. Penn State was actually ranked higher than us for the preseason rankings, and obviously the wheels have fallen off a little bit, especially with Drew Aller not being there. So unfortunately, I think this game is going to be kind of another snooze fest for your Buckeyes, and that bums me out. But hopefully it'll be another easy win for Ohio State, and we keep on rolling, right? So that's ultimately what we want. We're all Ohio State fans here. So that's all I've got for you on this week's episode. Appreciate it. That's a wrap for the Rust Belt Rivalry podcast. Browns fans, Bengals fans, hang in there. Hopefully some brighter days ahead. Buckeye Nation, a lot to look forward to. Everybody across the board is picking us to repeat. I'm super pumped about that. Please make sure to like our YouTube videos here. It helps with the algorithm. Subscribe if you like what you hear. Share it with your friends. Hit us up on social media. You can find us on Twitter, X, whatever you call it. I'm trying to expand the platform here. So anything that you can comment, reply, like, whatever, it all helps us grow and reach other people. So thanks for listening to another episode. We appreciate all.